Since my last video got hit with crippling restrictions on account, I believe, of the crime of including an image of St. George of Floyd during his encounter with the Minneapolis Police Department, I've decided to redo the video slightly, re-upload it with that image removed, plus another image of the Manchester airport scene, which could conceivably have also caused problems. Plus I've also taken the opportunity to make a virtue of a necessity and rephrase what turned out to be a very badly thought out line. So if there is some audio or visual discrepancy at some point which the eagle-eyed might spot, that is the reason, although I have put on the same shirt to be as careful as possible. So this is hopefully the YouTube friendly and slightly better worded version of that video. Reform UK is bringing a private prosecution against the miscreants who attacked fully 4 airport cops in that what is now infamous Manchester airport incident, where first the video emerges of the cop kicking a Muslim boy on the ground in the head. Big outrage across the media. Yay! George Floyd moment incoming finally in the UK. Oh dear, CCTV footage emerges of just 20 seconds previous to that, which tells us why the cop was kicking the boy in the first place, because he'd just been on a cop-beating rampage. CPS, sudden total silence, other than going after the cops themselves for dealing with the Muslim boy. I'll read just a few paragraphs of the letter which they wrote giving notice of the private prosecution, which would have benefited from a proofreader, it has to be said. Dear Home Secretary, on Tuesday 23rd July a violent incident took place at Manchester Airport where 2 men viciously attacked a number of police officers, including some who were armed. There is clear CCTV evidence showing exactly how brutal this attack was on the officers, being a very serious offence. The assailants used such a high level of force that one female officer had her nose broken and other officers were floored and injured. The officers showed great restraint in only using tasers rather than their weapons, for which they should be applauded. Some 11 weeks later, the assailants have still not been charged and are free on the streets. Given their aggression to those officers, they must be considered a risk to the public. Yet, just 2 weeks after this incident, we saw that other people who committed the same offence of assaulting police officers were summarily arrested, charged and jailed within days with long sentences to act as a deterrent. And then about the IOPC investigation into the cops. The IOPC investigation is ongoing, and bizarrely it appears that they are also investigating the leak of the footage that exonerates the police officers. In reality, common sense dictates that the OPC should have closed their investigation when this full footage emerged. There is no excuse for this long delay, which shines a very poor light on the CPS and IOPC when the public want prompt, fair, equal justice. Such is the public concern over two-tier policing that the CPS and IOPC must give an urgent update on why this is all taking so long. We presume everyone has been interviewed by now, but perhaps they can confirm if this is correct. The CCTV footage is clear. It should not be difficult to make a decision. We have genuine reason to be concerned that in fact the CPS is awaiting for the IOPC to find some fault with the police officers, which will then give them a reason not to progress charges against the assailants. This is totally unacceptable. When you know that a document is going to receive wide scrutiny, employ a proofreader. Mistakes aside, this is wittingly or unwittingly a masterstroke, as it's forced the CPS to act. Originally, they had 2 options, which were to act or not to act. And when this came out in the UK, this was the establishment, the judiciary, the media, whatever, this was their George Floyd moment. A criminal black man on the ground in the vicinity of a policeman's lower appendages, which are acting in non-entirely benevolent manner towards his upper extremities, even though it is always worth pointing out that Derek Chauvin in the George Floyd business was acting exactly in line with recommended procedures as laid out in the Minneapolis Police Manual at the time. But whatever, now we can, St. George of Floyd style, hardcore pile on the hated white man and deify the sainted black man, Muslims in the UK, like never before. Oh dear, shot to hell the moment the exonerating CCTV footage came out. Where to go at that point? Well, pretend that the exonerating footage doesn't exist and proceed against the cops and also whoever leaked the footage. Did I mention that? There is no longer the option to not go ahead. Now it's go ahead or don't go ahead, but face the prosecution being taken over privately. What they would like to do is to let the reform private prosecution go ahead, then take it over themselves and drop it. Did you know they can do that? They can do it, They've done it before, and they would certainly love to do it here if the circumstances permitted, i.e. if they could do it under the usual complete cloak of secrecy with hardly anybody finding out. So here we are. The right to bring private prosecutions is preserved by Section 6.1 of the Prosecution of Offences Act 1985. There are, however, some limitations. The Director of Public Prosecutions has power under Section 6.2 POA 1985 to take over private prosecutions. When to take over a private prosecution in order to stop it. A private prosecution should be taken over and stopped if, upon review of the case papers, either the evidential sufficiency stage or the public interest stage of the full code test is not met. And they list various examples, including cases where it can be said that the prosecution is vexatious, yada yada yada, or malicious, yada yada yada. Exactly what reason they'd give in the event doesn't matter, but normally all this would happen under a cloak of secrecy, and now it's going to be played out in a very public space. So the choice is, go ahead with the thing, let the private prosecution go ahead, take it over and bin it, or let the private prosecution go ahead. They can't let the private prosecution go ahead because they'll just end up looking like a bunch of buffoons, and they can't take it over and bin it because they'll be signalling Islam UK on a countrywide scale, and they don't want to do that. All they can realistically do at this point is to take the prosecution themselves, take it on themselves, and prosecute these two little ethnic toe rags. Or, in the event that they don't mind ending up looking like a bunch of buffoons, they could not go ahead with it and let Reform UK go ahead with their private prosecution. But what they're not going to do is take it over themselves after they've started it and bin it, because that would be disastrous. That would be a disastrous look for them. So in any event, whether the CPS go ahead with it or they do inexplicably leave it to Reform UK to bring their own private prosecution, i.e. do the CPS job for them, in either event, Reform get what they want. And I think that's quite clever.